When we survey people, the most common thing is just people just feel anxiety, they're overwhelmed. Right now, it's kind of a bloated state of the internet. A lot of things that you hear online these days is around add this security layer, get this virus protection, which are all needed, but there are all more layers on top of stuff. Yorba's goal is to basically help people get rid of the last 2 decades of bloated internet that has built up around them in all these different ways, and then in the future be able to live a more intentional life.
Hello and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Ulrich, and I'm also the co-founder of the big mothership website of this podcast called The Goodness Exchange. Now, if you're struggling with your worldview up against this avalanche of craziness that we see in our digital lives, The Goodness Exchange is someplace you want to check out. I'll just tell you, twice a day. Start your day and end your day with something there. There are no ads. We've promised no politics and no ads for about 12 years. I have purposely, very carefully curated the content at the Goodness Exchange for thousands of articles about what's right with the world that won't offend anyone. I'm a real Midwestern girl, and I've spent 35 years trying to make 40 patients a day feel welcome in my dental practice. And I take that to heart when we constructed the Goodness Exchange and chose the things we were going to celebrate there. So the Goodness Exchange is there for you. This podcast, however, is an extension of the amazing interviews that we were already doing, writing our articles over there at the big global news website. About 2020, I decided to start actually recording the conversations I was already having with global thought leaders. And here we are still now 5+ years later, talking to folks like the amazing guests that we're going to talk to today. And this topic, I think, is one that kind of hits home for all of us. Let me just set us up here a little bit. There's a moment for many of us. It often happens at night or at the end of the day, or maybe first thing in the morning, when we catch ourselves starting our day with the crazy scrolling habit that we've got now. Or maybe you're not caught up in all the scrolling and all the too long on social media, but maybe your inbox is just coming out of its seams at all times. We all know about the craziness in our digital lives, and today's conversation is for anyone who has ever felt the unease about that and wondered if there might be a better way forward. My guest today is Chris Zeunstrom. He's a designer, a founder, and a deeply thoughtful human being who is asking one of the most important questions of our times. What would the internet look like if it were actually built for people? Who knew in 1993 that we'd have to be asking ourselves that 30 years later? But this conversation isn't just about technology. It's going to be about agency over this thing now that's called our digital life. Remember, we used to just have 2 lives, our working life and our personal life. And we used to work pretty hard to keep the 2 separate and make sure one didn't spill over and ruin the joy in the other. Well, this conversation is about how this digital life most of us have, it needs an update. We need to talk about agency. We need to talk about clarity. We need we're going to give you some answers about what happens when we can start managing the internet with intention. And Chris has spent his career at the intersection of where this all comes from: design, ethics, innovation. From his earliest work for global design firms and civic tech, he's now building a platform called Yorba.co. I'm just going to say that again. It was a word that I had some trouble remembering in the beginning. Yorba, YORBA.co is where you can find Chris's work that we're talking about today. Anyway, this platform treats people not as data points, but as thoughtful, capable humans, capable of taking back their digital lives. And what I love most about this, Yorba isn't using fear. This is not about locking things down and running from technology. It's about creating an internet that feels lighter, that's more humane, that's aligned with who we actually are as individuals. That is possible. It is possible. So today we're going to talk about digital clutter, surveillance culture, the mythology of free platforms, and what it means to build tools that respect our privacy and open up a world of possibility for us. If you've been listening to this podcast for very long, you know that I use the internet to bring so much joy into my own life because I've been really, really diligent, even kind of crazily so, about not getting myself in a place where my algorithms are bringing me the nuttiness of the world. Instead, I see most of what's right with the world. So you can get there too. It's probably going to be by a whole different route than I got there, but Chris is our storyteller, is our informer, is our guide to what we do next if we want our digital lives to be less of a wet blanket. So Chris, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, so nice to meet you, Linda, and thanks for having me on. Really love all the work that you guys have been doing at the Goodness Exchange, and yeah, I'm just really excited to talk about kind of all the topics and how to make people feel lighter online, right? I like the term that you used of just kind of that feeling of lighter, because I think everybody feels overwhelmed these days in so many different facets of their lives, and there's ways to feel lighter.
I think that I've been saying since I started the Goodness Exchange. I mean, this is all why I started the Goodness Exchange.
Yeah.
Is because in 2013, I saw so many of my patients who I had otherwise known for decades as cheerful. Well, by 2013, the internet was starting to break us down. The craziness in social media, the negative noise in the news. Oh. And I said, for God's sake, somebody's got to do something about this. So the Goodness Exchange is what I came up with to harness what I was uniquely built to contribute. And here we are still at it 11 years later, or 12 now. And I tell you, I think the way we connected was through a wonderful gal who is an editor for the Goodness Exchange. She recognized instantly where you were going, and she knows our work better than anyone because she reviews every single thing we put out there. And she said, oh my gosh, Dr. Linda has to talk to Chris. We have to get the word out that there is an opportunity here to live a different digital life. So I'm That's so great. Glad that you're here.
I'm glad she connected. Yeah, I'm glad that she connected us. We share same vibe, same intent, kind of same ethos and stuff. And it's hard to do the right things when a lot of the wrong things online these days are the most convenient. So
yeah. I see it all the time. So that most people don't realize that the reality that is being constructed in front of them is not reality. It's some version of reality that's overhyped. It's so much chaos, all the things. And there are about 8 billion realities right now on the internet, considering all the different ways that the internet is feeding us a constant, steady diet of usually unease or dis-ease. I mean, that's where the word disease comes from, is a dysfunctional, unhealthy pathology. So let's not get too far into the weeds here. Let's start right off with two terms that I think we ought to understand right up the top here before we get into things like digital minimalism and, what's actually possible, fighting innovation with innovation, all that stuff that we're going to talk about. By the way, I should tell people that this interview is carefully constructed across the generational lines. I almost never do this, but I brought my co-founder, Liesl, in on both of the pre-call interviews that I had with Chris. Liesl is a Harvard grad. She had been to 27 countries by the time she was 21. She's super worldly, but she's a down-home girl here from Vermont in the end. She has an incredible way of thinking as zooming in and zooming out. And I really felt like her generation, we had to get her input on here because she's at the nexus of this generation that's deciding to turn off social media and really get this thing under control. So the questions that Chris and I have come upon and what we decided to talk about are informed by both my, retired sort of genius, which it has a certain genius to it by being able to look way back, and Liesl's, her lovely way of knowing and communicating what could be. She is a full of possibility kind of person. So this conversations for everyone. Let's start with this term, surveillance and capitalism era of the internet.
Yeah.
Because I think we all hear bits and pieces of it, and it's kind of scary,
Yeah.
and we shut the door. It's like thinking about the edge of the universe. We just don't want to do that. We don't know how to get out of it, so we can't. So talk to us about these two things, because that's the big umbrella where we're at.
That's
right?
That's the big umbrella. And basically, that's kind of where the internet existed through Web 1.0, 2.0. But people really define that as kind of the search eras and the social eras, right? So think about the launch of Google and the launch of Facebook as basically defining eras, but are both kind of bricks that kind of just kept layering on this kind of surveillance capitalism path. And really what that means is just that, people here now and people are more aware and more cognizant that if you're not paying for it, they're making money somehow, right? So they're selling their data, they're doing stuff like that. Everything that you do is connected online, whether you like it or not. There's marketplaces that combine people's data. All these different accounts that you have created over the last 20 years are still doors for them to understand at least a part of who you were, where you were, probably a trajectory of like your life and all of that. And yeah, that's, surveillance capitalism is how the internet exists today.
Anything that is free on the internet is not free. It's at some point the piper has to be paid. So there is a mechanism. If we join it, there's a mechanism where we are being sold.
Yeah, I mean, so surveillance capitalism is essentially, it's if you're not paying for it, they are making money somehow, right? Mm. And it's usually going to be on your attention, your clicks, or something else like that. Some way to enhance the data and move it around.
Okay. And that's just the way the internet came to be. I always hesitate to be part of some conspiracy theories or anything that implies bad intention. I always like to tell people, gosh, in 1991, 92, 93, when the internet was just coming into a major being, those engineers didn't have some evil scientist thing going on. They were just running into work every morning and excited that they could connect people and information.
Yeah. No, I agree.
We didn't get here.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of platforms that, that were started with good intent, right? And they're trying to connect something or some community around art or around something like that. But if you go too long, eventually, right, you're going to have to pay for the expanded cost of like serving those members that you have, or they would call them users. In Yorba's world, everything's a member, not a user. But they're going to try to find a way to make money. And the only way to do that, because, there's tons of studies around, if you make people pay for it, a lot of them will leave. They don't want people to leave, right? So it's actually more beneficial for them to monetize that, right? And there's a lot of models that have existed over time that are similar to that. It's just, it's usually more upfront, like advertising in a newspaper, than it is today, which a lot of money has poured into like basically the back end infrastructure, moving data around to enhance profiles on people without them knowing.
Okay. And so that's why we should care. Tell us why we should care. Because I think Liesl mentioned yesterday when we talked a certain principle where, like, if not enough people care, it just keeps going on. Why should we care?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot of privacy reasons why to care and why to kind of shut all these different doors that you have about yourself, right? And like at the far end of the spectrum is kind of the identity theft that you hear, right? But that's like the tip of the iceberg, like after like years of rot, right? Is that your data somewhere that's easy enough for really bad actors to take advantage of it? And that's more rare, but it's more rare in the grand scheme of things, but more common today, which is scary because everything's compounding. But, in general senses, it's just that people, when we survey people, we do like an annual state of clutter survey. The most common thing is just people just feel anxiety. They're overwhelmed, right? Like society, digital and physical society like mirrors itself a little bit these days. And one of the things around just kind of like the internet wasn't built originally, right? Because a lot of these platforms and stuff that still dominate today were before like smartphones can send you notifications and all that type of stuff. So it's just, why should you care? It's because you have so many things that you've created that are just like, just always following you around, asking for more. And, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And like now we still use email addresses as a primary identity, right? We still use a lot of social profiles in Google and stuff as like single sign-on to things because it was meant to be easier and more convenient. But those are, almost 20 years old from a perspective. And now today, 85% of the emails from our studies, 85% of the emails in your inbox are just marketing emails or spam. So like only 15% of things you actually even probably care about, right? That aren't automated and aren't things you didn't ask for, right? And on average, people have 246 online accounts. Most people would guess they have like, maybe 100 when we ask people. It's always like double or like a multiple of doubles. It's crazy. And then there's all the subscription spending, which you've seen more and more about that. And, Yorba was recently in the Wall Street Journal talking about subscription spending, and the Financial Times talking about subscription spending. And it's basically because there is this kind of like consumer overload. And the first place that a lot of people are going to start to feel like, oh, wait, this is getting out of hand, is their wallets, right? They start to notice like, wow, everything's so expensive these days. And that inflation's been crazy, like everything's crazy these days. And one of the things is that there's all these little micro subscriptions you forget about, and they're built to forget about, right? They might be super small. So.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that kind of brings us to that, this notion of what Yorba's goals are, because I want people to understand right off what we're talking about here. Everybody that listens to this podcast regularly knows that what we're all about is celebrating what's right with the world.
Yeah.
And it's that one simple sentence: celebrate what's right with the world. So here we are talking to you because you have this platform that may help us get relief and eventually get some freedom to choose the kind of digital lives we want. So tell us about Yorba's goals.
Yeah, I mean, Yorba's goal is for people to be able to operate online and move around freely online with just less weight, to feel lighter, to feel cleaner, to be more intentional with what they do online. Right now, I feel like it's kind of a bloated state of the internet, and it's kind of like we equate it to almost like carrying around like just this huge weighted backpack, right? And it's a hard thing for people to understand because it doesn't have physical weight necessarily, right? The same way that if you walk into a room and there's just stuff everywhere, you're like, oh my God, this is a mess. But that is the state of basically everyone's digital lives right now. And it's easier because hard problems take time, right, to solve. It's not a quick fix, but it's more of a daily habit that needs to, be maintained and actively monitored. But, Yorba's goal is to basically help people get rid of kind of the last 2 decades of like a bloated internet that has built up around them in all these different ways. And then in the future, be able to live a more intentional life connected directly to private data that they authenticate and share to the platforms that they adore or that have, that have a productive use for them, basically.
Okay, because that gets back to the whole thing. I mean, this 20 years back, gosh, I don't even know what kind of a internet user I was 20 years back. Liesl, my co-founder, she would have been 12, and she was the one who chose our Apple ID, and we've been stuck with this crazy idea. Like, when you really think about it, you're going to look back into people's internet history 20 years, and you're offering a way to clean up all that clutter. This is like standing in front of one of those garages or basements that you can no longer put one more thing in. And you have good things in there. I mean, we can acknowledge that there's good things that we do want to come our way, but we can't even find it anymore in the mess that we face every day.
Yeah. No, I think that's going back 20 years, it's an intentional thing. We don't want to go back all the way to, it's almost impossible to go back all the way to the beginning, right? Because we're not going to ask you to upload your AOL CD you got in the mail, right? Yeah. But we can go back to the start of like modern email as an identifier. And that's where we start.
Okay, so give us a little roadmap. I don't even know, like a marker. Drop a pin in what 20 years ago. What was happening on the internet 20 years ago, so people appreciate how far back that was.
Yeah, 20 years ago, Facebook, you could only sign up with the .edu account, right? It was probably just about to go into a wider span, but at the time it was just doing college campuses. Gmail, you probably still needed your friend to invite you to Gmail. It was private. It was a side project from Google at the time that somebody created on there. Google used to have probably still does, like an Innovation Fridays, like a 20% project. It was someone's just random project, right? There was no smartphones, so there was no notifications. So there was no like automated emailing and stuff like that. If you signed up for basically you were still signed up for like RSS feeds so that you could get notified of your favorite writers posting a blog on Blogspot, right? That's kind of where we were at. And now if you fast forward to today, obviously that's all been automated with a ton of gas.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So the opposite of where we are now, you call digital minimalism.
Yeah.
Which really, as I stand in front of my internet garage, jam-packed to the fullest, and I want certain things from way back there, and don't know how to find them, and then also just slam the door because I feel powerless in front of this digital mayhem that follows me all around, like you said. Talk to us about this concept of digital minimalism.
Yeah, absolutely. So digital minimalism is a term that was coined by Cal Newport. He has a book about it, about living a more intentional life.
Let's be sure, Chris, if you know books like this, because one of the things that I neglected to tell you in our many conversation pre-calls was that we always love to not leave people just unfinished at the end of this, like excited but unfinished. So please, anytime you think of something that the everyday person might like to look into next, please mention it here, and we'll make sure all that gets in the written show notes on the Goodness Exchange article.
Amazing. Yeah. So the book is by Cal Newport. He lives on the East Coast somewhere, but it's called Digital Minimalism, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. And there's a lot of really great concepts in there. Another book that kind of inspired a lot of stuff around minimalism, but also on the East Coast is the Clue Train Manifesto, which is about vendor relationship management, which is the inverse, which we'll get into later. But what digital minimalism really is all about, it's just about keeping the things that bring you joy or that you need for productivity, and then just kind of getting rid of the things that don't, turning off notifications and trying to live, as it says in the choosing a more focused life, right? So not letting all these different distractions and stuff getting into your world. And the way that they kind of try to break it down, because it can be kind of a heady concept, but it's growing in a lot of areas of the internet, right? You have platforms like Bullet Journal, which is around like journaling, and kind of like focusing in on stuff in an offline way, not a digital way, like with a physical journal and stuff like that, like a whole design system to that. But I mean, if you think about digital minimalism at its core, right? Like imagine if like everything you ever bought or signed up for just like followed you around the house, like old blenders or like coupons, and everyone's just like beeping at you all the time for your attention. Because that's kind of where we're at online these days. It's just like everything was not meant to always be yelling and asking for you at all times. And that's the way we live online, because no matter what we sign up for, they want to maintain that relationship. And so what digital minimalism is about is severing those. And where a lot of people start, there's a whole process to it, like, a 10-step kind of process to digital minimalism that people get into. But why people like Yorba is because like one of the first main steps is email, right? Because that's what weighs people down in the morning and at night. And, they wake up from sleeping and they're like, oh, I've got 23 new emails, and like 85% of those, like I mentioned before, are going to be things you don't even actually need to read. So if you cut all of that out, you can start to really be more intentional. Like, oh, I really look forward to my Friday Goodness Exchange email, right? I have a couple things that I subscribe to that I'm never going to get rid of because I like reading their takes on things. But you can get rid of all the rest.
All right. So I guess right here, it's important to acknowledge that people will have seen things that seem like what you're doing already on the internet that's available. Companies that promise to declutter your digital lives. Tell me why Yorba's different than this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I think our overall kind of vision of where we want to go with relationship management is very different than anything that we're competing with today. But then, the easy things are we founded Yorba as a public benefit corporation. It's very important to us. It's in our bylaws. It's like how we were done. A lot of the other tools we compete with are feel good, kind of quick hit dopamine things, if I'm going to be honest, that don't necessarily go to the root of the problem and actually delete things or do all the hard work that Yorba is doing to actually try to reduce the amount of stuff you have online. They just hide it, right? So it does feel better. You don't see it, right? But it's just like, if we're using kind of the digital minimalism stuff and like the real life minimalism stuff, it'd be the same type of thing. It was like buying a storage locker and just stuffing everything in there and be like, problem solved. So Yorba is very different.
Chris, that is an amazing analogy. Let's just stick with this because I think people can identify with it, right? Your garage gets so full, your car can no longer go in there. So what do? Instead of getting rid of the stuff, like really getting rid of it, trips and trips to Habitat for Humanity, which is what I've been doing in the last year and a half. You get a storage unit and just put it all there. That is a remarkable way to explain what's different about Yorba. I've gone there myself on Yorba, and I can see that it's definitely going to change the quotient of joy in my life not to have all this clutter coming at me every day. That I had to give up on Seth Godin's daily email blog, which is one of the most fantastic ones out there, because it came every single day at me like I couldn't keep up with one insight after another. And that's a shame, because if my inbox had been less cluttered, I probably wouldn't. His blog is so precious every day. It's so short and so perfect to the moment. But I think I gave up on that. I think I threw the baby out with bathwater of that, because it was probably a day when I was just feeling so overwhelmed by my inbox in general.
And I think that's it's hard, and that's the hardest thing for people to do, is to kind of, when we were talking about digital minimalism, like there's certain things, right? It's like either get rid of it, or if you don't know if you want to get rid of it, you put it in a box, you wait 30 days. That's one of the principles of physical minimalism. And we're trying to mirror that in the digital realm, right? And one of the hardest things with kind of any platform like Yorba, and like, there's subscription apps out there right now that help you cut your subscriptions, renegotiate your subscriptions. How we're different than that is, Yorba is a black or white type of thing. Like you either want it or you don't. We don't go negotiate. We don't try to think. It's just like, and it's a lot easier to, because we have our own kind of call center on behalf of people, and we have automated ways. We work with Consumer Reports on data rights protocol to help automate all these ways out of platforms, and GDPR, CCPA, all these privacy laws that are coming out. We're trying to work to automate all that, but we also have our own physical dedicated deletion team agents that call on behalf of people that don't have time, that are just basically digital declutterers, and they just call and they follow up and they chase it down. And so that's very different than a lot of the kind of subscription apps and stuff. And then when it comes to like the email unsubscribing tools, I'll be honest, like the biggest competitor that we have right now got sued by the US government, can't even operate in Europe where I live because of their data rights, because it's free. But they sell all of your data, so they get access to your inbox, and then they essentially mine that. So I think so when you ask how we're different, I think that there's it's kind of like sometimes when people are like, well, how are you ethically different than things like that? It's kind of who we are and what we began as and where we want to go. That's different, and that's hard to define sometimes. But I think how we are approaching it is that it's a big problem. We're taking realistic steps, not the easy kind of like feel good steps that make people feel better about it. It's a longer road that we're on, but a more deeply rewarding one at the end. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to circle back to this public benefit corporation, because I don't want people to miss that. I've done some interviews way back when this was just beginning to be a thing, where I encourage people, if they have a choice between two businesses, choose a public benefit corp. Even if you know almost nothing else about the business, you're going to be supporting goodness in the world. At least you got half a shot at it. So talk about public benefit corps versus regular old let's make money corporations.
Yeah, so basically on the spectrum of like incorporating a company, specifically in the US, because it doesn't exist everywhere in the world, but you're going to have like nonprofits, right, which are going to be grants and stuff like that. And then you're going to have C Corps, which are the companies that most of us operate within any given day. In the middle of that is the public benefit corporation, right, which is a balance between that. So Yorba is a public benefit so that we can still be for profit, but we don't have to put profit above all else. So
and you commit to that. I
we
think
commit to that.
the biggest thing, you commit to that at the beginning. So
Yeah.
this is when I fell in love with the whole concept and started raving about it, is when I realized that there were companies that say, with good intention, I'm going to do business, but by golly, as soon as I reach a certain threshold, I'm going to give away 10% of our income to charities or the benefits of society. Okay. So the difference between, and that's good intention. I'm not dissing that, but there's something even better with companies that are public benefit corporations. You commit to a whole list of hoops you got to jump through right at the beginning, from the beginning.
Yeah.
Is that true?
That is true. And I think people, public benefit, PBC, as well as B Corp, they're both good things, right? B Corp, you have to commit at the beginning, like you said, and it's in your kind of bylaws of how you're going to govern the company. So it's intrinsic to like how you started and where you're going. Whereas B Corp, which is, that's something that you can acquire later. And there are good things about it where you have to maintain it every year and stuff like that. You pay a licensing type of fee to this company that makes sure that you are doing what you say you're going to do. And there are really successful B Corps that like started a long time ago before public benefits even existed. I think in your neck of the woods, like Ben and Jerry's and stuff is one of the most, that's one of the most like sought after examples of like a B Corp or Patagonia. There's like, and it signals that you're trying to do things differently. So they're both good in their own ways. It's just some of those companies, probably like Ben & Jerry's, probably would have started as a public benefit corporation if that existed when they started the company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. That's just a little side trip I wanted to take people on.
Yeah.
If they want to know what makes Yorba different than some of the other companies that are promising some digital relief, there are many, but that's one of them. Is that you've made this commitment to be on balance a positive force in the world forever from the beginning, which I really, really love. And I don't interview a lot of folks that are in business, and certainly this interview isn't meant to promote anything, but something that I came across that I think can make people's lives more joyful and less chaotic. Okay,
for the PBC.
Yes, yeah.
Well, one other point I would say on the PBC that I think is interesting is when we told our lawyers we wanted to do it, they said, "Don't do it," because it makes it harder to raise capital. Because when that was our thing was like, well, great, we'll be member owned, right? And we'll go the long route and we'll bootstrap it, which we have been doing for 3 years. Because, PBC comes with its own downfalls, but those downfalls are things that we wanted to embrace as part of the culture of Yorba, which is investors don't like it because they're not number one.
They're not number one.
Yeah.
All right. So folks, now you just got an insider stake on how to maybe search the companies that you want to do business with. Public benefit corporations are going to be doing something that makes the world a little bit better place. Agreed. Okay, back to this whole digital life and decluttering. Okay, so describe what you've given us some factoids. Describe what the current state of our digital lives is. Especially, I love this kingdom's rule. Word. That's such an insider's rule. But when you talked to me about it, I was like, oh, that is so much how it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of things that started with good intention to like connect the world or be able to search the internet and all this type of stuff, eventually they've all become these huge kingdoms that acquire innovation and kind of squash innovation. And, they all just kind of like move data between these different kingdoms, essentially, on the internet. And I think it has really slowed down the amount of innovation and stuff that's going on online right now. And things start. The internet was originally conceived by Tim Berners-Lee, which is a company we worked with, his Solid protocol, this like storage company, his new company. But the original thing was to just to connect data, basically to connect different like research initiatives and stuff. And that was the founding of like the World Wide Web, WWW, right? Was to connect all these type of things. But what he did not foresee and what has happened is that the largest players essentially created these kingdoms around there, walled in all of their data, made it hard to use it, right? And they don't let it go away. So then to get the same value from that, you have to walk inside of the kingdom, basically. And, right now, our digital lives, I think we have over 10,000 people that were in our recent survey type of stuff on Yorba. And in general, like we're just living a world of complete digital overexposure, right? How many different things that we've accumulated. And it's always eye-opening when people get on Yorba the first time, and it's overwhelming. We're working to try to make that simpler for people because, it's a lot of stuff when you look at your digital lives and all the different iterations of that for the last kind of couple of years, 20 plus years. But, the internet, it definitely operates right now in a world of overexposure, and it is ruled by empires, although they like to call them communities. It's not really as communal as it used to be. The open source kind of communities definitely exist and stuff like that. But you can basically, the easiest example is even on like Apple charging devices, right? How they're not allowed to do that anymore in certain areas, right? Of just keep changing the way that you charge your phone. That's a way to just keep extracting value from the same thing over and over again. But that would be a kingdom, not a community. And, there's all this stuff around enshittification, which is a term going on out there, that all of these kingdoms kind of got to a certain point, and then their products have slowly been degrading, but you can't go anywhere else to use it, like Google search and stuff like that is kind of the prime example that people show, like more ads on Google, less relevance on Google, but it's a kingdom and you have to go there. And people are searching for examples now, and that's why people are examples, alternatives, and that's why people are starting to go to like the DuckDuckGos or use different types of search engines. It's why AI search is a huge problem for Google because that represents the new, an ushering of the new era, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I totally think your last point there is something that most of us realize. But then there's a level of dysfunction. The system isn't made for folks who want to use the internet freely. If you go to DuckDuckGo, my sister uses it, and she's always complaining because she can't get the same results that I can get.
It's true.
Yeah,
because it doesn't know a lot about you.
Right.
It's going based on keywords and geography. So.
Okay, good. That's good for us to understand. Yeah, please, Chris, throw in little insider knowledge to us anytime you'd like. I've kind of begged Chris to find that happy medium between using insider language and making sure we all come away like we have somebody on the inside on our side, which I gotta say, after getting to know Chris, I really feel like we've got that. I just have to share with people. So I just brought up my results because it just finished the complete scan of my digital history. And I want to tell you, if you'd asked me of the last 20 years of my inbox, how many logins were there to new places, I suspect that's what it means. I would have guessed in the 300 range, maybe 400. 975.
Okay. You're okay.
And I'm a really conservative internet user because I learned about it in 2013 when I tried to create the Goodness Exchange. I was a complete digital novice. Well, not complete. I built a giant website in 2005. But I guess I don't mean I had the savvy that you would have had. 975.
900's a lot. That's more than me when I started. Now I'm down much lower, but yeah.
Okay, so just from a practical sense, and then we're going to take a quick break. But from a practical sense, what's Yorba going to be able to do for me now that I know I got that kind of load?
Yeah. So, one of the things that Yorba is trying to do is trying to, one, aggregate all this data that's in disparate platforms and corners and nooks and closets all over the place and put it into a way for you to understand it, sort by it, and start removing it. That's really what we're trying to do. And we're also trying to give you data that's hard to understand, that don't want you to necessarily understand. We think of it like a reverse CRM. CRM in our world is a customer relationship manager, which is what all of these platforms have to manage you. And so what we're trying to do is, if they have you on their list, we're trying to get that off their list and make you have a list of them, basically. So it's, And then by doing that, we also try to enhance the data based on things that we have from your inbox. So like give you more data so that you can make informed choices on it. So like when you get all your mailing lists, right? How many, how often do you open it? How many emails do they send on average per month? So if you because not all mailing lists are the same. Like you said, some of them are daily, some of them are just weekly, right? So if I only get one email a week and I really like it, I'm probably going to keep it, right? If I get 2 emails a day from some platforms, which is the case for some platforms out there, and I see that the monthly frequency of emails is 45 or 50 emails a thing on Yorba, if you unsubscribe from that, we'll equate all those, and so how many, multiply that by 12, and you just saved 600 emails that year, right? It's crazy.
Whoa. Okay, and
so
and that is crazy, and I think that what people don't understand, and what I really went crazy in 2025 and tried to unsubscribe. I spent so much time in 2025 trying to unsubscribe from things. But what you pointed out to me in the pre-call was that just because you unsubscribe to something doesn't mean you unsubscribe to all 15 of their things.
Yeah. So we can talk a little bit about the Spam Act and stuff like that. So basically the way that newsletter, so the Spam Act is something that was passed like a government kind of policy that made it so they have to allow you to unsubscribe from emails, right? So anytime that we tell a company they have to do something, they do it to the minimal type of thing that they have to, right? So like GDPR here in Europe, it's like, well, you have to tell people you're collecting that. Now we all have to click on cookie banners every single time we go to any site in Europe, because that was the solution to that, which is we're still given the data. Now we just have to agree to it or disagree to it, and then the site doesn't work. But on the mailing list type of thing, people are like, oh yeah, I get emails from LinkedIn, but you're not on one list at LinkedIn. So if you unsubscribe, or I'm picking on LinkedIn, but they're a bad example. They send a lot of email. So I'm at Acme Co. So at Acme Co, that sends 50 emails a month or 30 emails a month, and I unsubscribe. I'm like, oh, nice, I unsubscribed from that. You probably only unsubscribed from the Tuesday at 10 a.m. email, because what they do is they take that email and they say, oh, I've got Linda's email. It's not just one list. They're going to bifurcate that out into 15 different lists. All right, put her on the product notifications, the weekly roundup, the daily roundup, all those type of things. So if you say, I don't want this email, they'll be like, okay, well, Linda's now not going to get that, because by law, we're not going to send the email on Tuesday at 10 a.m. But you're still going to get the Wednesday at 10 a.m. And the Thursday, you have to do it every single day. So what Yorba helps you do is just automate that. We group it and just try to eliminate all of them in bulk actions. So,
got it. And we would, as ordinary people, not know where to begin to do that.
No.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot of manual tracking and manual kind of diligence.
And I suppose that those 975 subscribes, those are all connected to other things that they sold my data to, or the access to,
Yeah, I mean, those are on the logins. So the 975 you're talking about, there's going to be mailing lists in there, and there's going to be logins. So the logins are going to be anything that we found that triggered our machine learning and AI that we put in to find all of these type of things. People can also upload CSVs of password managers, so direct things they use today. But a lot of people scan back for 20 years just to make sure that they shut all the doors for privacy reasons. But yeah, those are going to be things that you've most likely signed up to over the last 20 years. Some of them might be things you went to, I don't know, a poetry reading at a cafe shop in 2008, right? You don't know. And then that created an account for you at cafe, whatever. And then if cafe gets bought by Starbucks, now all of a sudden Starbucks has your data because you went to a poetry slam at a coffee shop 15 years ago. That's what we're trying to help people reduce that. Because really the only way, for privacy and reduction and kind of a calmer internet life, the best way is just to go at the source and kind of slowly remove those. And on Yorba, you don't have to do it yourself, because we have our own teams. So you just have to go through and say, delete, 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 delete. And then we're going to try the consumer reports data rise protocol. We're going to try an automated way. We're going to send the automated email. But the thing that makes Yorba different is a lot of these kind of quick win platforms, they'll automate an email towards these platforms and say, by GDPR, you must remove this. And then no company responds to it because they're like, who are you and stuff. On Yorba, we treat it more like a data debt collection agency is kind of how we call it. So we follow a rigorous path, and that ends with human agents calling companies on your behalf because you give us a power of attorney to be able to essentially act just specifically on these data accounts, and not broad power of attorney. But so we basically have assistants, agents, whatever you want to call them, working for you to remove all these things offline. Because it's the only way is to because they won't listen. The platforms won't listen if you just send them an email and they're like, oh, I hope that they deleted my stuff. They don't listen. So they have to feel like you're going to keep coming. And so most people don't have the time to do that. I don't have the time for that. But Yorba has a process, what we call a resolution process. So everything that gets marked for deletion, or like a subscription that we found that gets marked for cancellation, Yorba goes through a systematic collection process, essentially, to collect your data back for you.
All right. This kind of reminds me of something that came up when I was talking to a person about decluttering our lives.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah.
And I think that before we go to the break, we'll at least acknowledge this part of it. A lot of the things that I subscribed to were either like when I took up fencing.
Yeah.
I had a 12-year-old who was wildly interested in sword fighting. She and I got into it together, and we just had the best time for about 3 years in fencing. And then poof, it was gone just as suddenly as it started. And I think when we look back at the things that we subscribe to on the internet, there's an aspirational quality to the things we hoped for when we subscribed. And I think it is like I took a look at that list of the 975. And a lot of them that came across, I looked at it like picking up something in my cluttered garage and deciding whether to part with it forever. And there were some aspirational things that, I remember that chef. I loved getting his recipes, I should get back to that. And so many things I said that about. I should get back to that. So there's this aspirational quality to cleaning out a garage, getting rid of sports equipment that we did when we were 22 and now we're 42 or 62.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that whole problem with the digital clutter.
Yeah. I think what people are starting to realize more and more now, and I think a lot of it is because of this new era of AI and stuff. They're signing all these privacy policies. Hey, we've updated this, we're updating this, so we're training on this and stuff. And so people are more cognizant that they keep having these things. And we always call it like the holiday season on the inverse is actually an interesting time to see who knows your data, because everyone comes out of the woodwork and like, hey, I got deals. So it's very interesting. But, what you're talking about, just kind of like it doesn't, these past selves and like the aspirational self, like it's all good and well. It's like I've signed up for hiking things. I've signed up for lots of like hobbyist type of things that I thought I was going to get really into for like a month that I haven't touched in 10 years, right? And so you don't want to throw it away because you're like, I don't know, maybe I'll start hiking. Maybe I'll do CrossFit. Maybe I want to do CrossFit. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep in this community and stuff. So you don't want to like necessarily close those doors, but I think it kind of, all of your kind of past iterations of yourself online, it's not like, in the physical form, right? You can kind of like go to something, and if you don't want to do it again, you just don't show up to that event anymore. And people are like, oh, whatever happened to that one guy? I don't know. What was his name? I don't know. But here, that like everybody knows everything and they don't forget anything unless you tell them to forget it. So it just continues to accumulate and it doesn't disappear. And it just tells people more and more about you. And that kind of goes back into that surveillance capitalism that we're talking about, right? But it is always interesting. And on Yorba, when you see the logins, we kind of look back at different years, how old, we give them birth dates, right? So you know when they were created, and we're starting to graph things, and we'll hopefully have stuff in 2026 that'll even like show people a little bit more interesting, like the spikes of data and like when they accrued the most event type of platforms or the most streaming type platforms, because you can kind of be like, oh, the streaming thing. Yeah, that was the start of COVID. Oh yeah, I signed up for everything. Oh, baking. Oh yeah, I did get into that sourdough craze. Air fryers, cool.
It's so true. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's this whole part of the equation that I'd like you to speak to about the things that we subscribe to that cost $4 or $6 a month that we don't even realize, unless you scrutinize your credit cards diligently, are just automatically rolling subscriptions. Can Yorba address that?
Yeah, we definitely address that. So the way that Yorba subscription kind of algorithms work is it's looking for anything that's a recurring spend, right? So it's not necessarily just digital subscriptions. It's also going to find things like gas and utilities, anything that you pay on a regular basis, a certain amount of money is what kind of goes into like recurring spend for us, right? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of platforms that will charge very minimal fees, and their hope that you won't forget, right? And there's a lot of stuff around, the dark patterns of kind of subscription management, and that you can essentially sign up for a platform and like we won't charge this credit card, but you're on a free trial or something. But then you don't really double click into things, and it's that free trial was actually 1 week, and it's like a lot of apps do this day, which is awful, and I think it's an awful pattern. But people do it all the time now. Is weekly subscriptions. So like, hey, I have this like a lot of games, and they target like teenagers and stuff like that who are like, oh, I've got a free trial, but it's only 1 week long. And then after that, you like sign up weekly to pay like $20 a week or something crazy like that. Or right after the week is over, you're an annual member at like a $200 price point, something crazy that you didn't realize. So, yeah.
All right. Before this interview's over, we'll have Chris just run down to refresh our memory because we're kind of going all over the place about how Yorba can help us rein in this chaos. But I can think of 5 other things right now. Let's go to a break and talk.
Yeah.
And in this break, again, I'm just trying to improve people's worldview with this project at the Goodness Exchange. We have no agenda. We have no advertising. I'm its sole funder and have been the whole time. Because of the reason that you mentioned earlier, I almost chimed in there, but if I were a nonprofit, I would spend 90% of my time chasing grants. And sometime a long time ago, a nonprofit founder told me, do not do that. Do not do what I did because it's a horrible life and you won't get to do what you're uniquely built to contribute. So I've found a way. But this little ad that you're going to listen to now is my take on improving your worldview with the same kind of vigor that you might be trying to improve your abs this time of year. All right, we'll be right back. You know how the constant negative noise in our digital lives feels like it's reaching a boiling point? Now, many of us have tuned out the news and social media almost entirely. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. There are newsworthy stories about amazing progress, innovation, leaps in human potential, and wonders in the natural world, and they're just not reaching the top of our feeds. We can have access to this, but none of us has the time or maybe even the emotional stamina to search through all the doom and gloom news to find what's right with the world. Okay, enter the Goodness Exchange. There, we are giving instant access to positive news for curious people. Did you hear about the recent Harvard study that found that exposure to just 4 minutes of good news can make you 32% less anxious and 18% more optimistic? Well, I don't know about you, but I need those kind of numbers in my life. So if you want to live with more joy and way less fear, it's really simple. First, you join us at the Goodness Exchange. Everyone around the world has the opportunity to access this kind of content. And we've promised no politics for about a decade, so you're safe from all that distraction as well. Second, you allow this new, more positive, balanced worldview to put a spring in your step again. It can change the way you react to your kids, your coworkers, everybody you come in contact with. And the stories we write about can make you the idea person in your circles. These challenging times call for us to wake up and take control of our perspective. The people who use the Goodness Exchange have the ability to react to the harshness of the world much different because they know way more about what's right with the world. And that's a resource. So subscribe to the Goodness Exchange, our YouTube channel and the podcast, and use this content to live a more expansive worldview. It is still an amazing world out there, and you can be a part of it. Welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness. Okay, we're back with founder Chris Zeunstrom. He has an amazing company that I was introduced to called Yorba.co that helps people declutter their digital lives. And this is not like all the other folks that are out there offering something similar. Yorba is trying to help us get to the root of the problem. The root. I've already started the process on helping to declutter my own life, and I was shocked. at what's out there about me, given the fact that I've been I thought, very savvy about not applying to the crazy world that's out there. And I guess I failed. So, Chris, one of the things I've found interviewing thought leaders all over the world, whether it's, folks that are addressing some huge climate change problem or removing polluted mining pollution in streams all over Ohio, or figuring out how to save the remaining rainforests, every single one of them. Jane Goodall, for God's sakes. I mean, she was at it till she was 90 something. The thing that they have in common is that they can see a future that the rest of us can't see. They have a lived experience, a whole conglomerate of incredible insights that allow them to see into a future that's possible for us all. Share what that looks like. If Yorba were successful at this level, and then the next level and the next level, because I assume that there's almost an infinite number of levels you want to go for. Tell us what a future could look like if your dream is realized with Yorba.
Yeah, no, Yorba's vision is basically for people to operate with more intentionality and with less online, right? And that's where we're starting with all the decluttering stuff. But where we want to go is basically like a central kind of control panel where people have their own private data, and that we help foster better relationships between people and the platforms that they want to use, and not all these different disparate sources, but you become your one source of your own digital identity, and be able to kind of procure the different services you want online, but it's managed from one place so that you can easily remove that from one place and don't have to go begging door to door in the future. So, our goal is to have healthy relationships online, have healthier people online, to create better digital lives and ecosystems that make it so both sides of that ecosystem, people and the platforms, they both are kind of obeying, and like, I guess obeying is a weird way to say it, but they're both being transparent and obeying the kind of like rules of the society of which we want to build in this digital ecosystem. Because right now it's very one way, right? It's very, very one way. And I think it can be both.
So a long time ago, when I started the Goodness Exchange, somewhere along the way, early on, I learned about the dark web.
Yeah.
And being how I am, I'm like, okay, if there's a dark web, there can be a light web. That's that. We need to just go there. I do a lot of public speaking, and I often say, remember, the first printing press that we devised is not the printing press we have today. We saw that it was a great thing. It changed life on Earth for humans, but then it became obsolete, and we had to think of a new way to do it. The same with the steam engine. My God, more people were being killed than helped with the steam engine in its first 20 years. Then we reimagined it. And the internet is no different. It's a human construct, and it's time to reimagine what's possible. So are you saying that it's possible to treat the internet like an ecosystem that we're at the center of? Because right now we don't. We aren't.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think, and that's one of the most exciting things I think around this new AI era that's starting, right, is that we're going to break free from this kind of search and social. We won't break free. It'll still be there. It'll be baggage that we're carrying forward. But the good thing about the AI era is it opens a new landscape, one that's not completely dominated yet. And for the first time, there'll actually be a way to fight kind of automation with automation, because the way that we don't have this light web as you're conceptualizing it right now is because it's impossible for general people to keep up with the automation of platforms and stuff like that, right? But when you have AI and you have agents and you can start to connect all that type of stuff and give your own kind of ability to have more agency over yourself online, which AI agents do and will do, there's definitely a way for kind of like private, personal AI and like data to be very powerful in the next wave, because people can start to control themselves a little bit better, if that makes sense. Because we've kind of learned from like, hey, we're going to sign up for this social profile, and then that social profile gets used for everything under the sun and like sold and all that. But now if you have how we conceptualize it on Yorba is essentially that you have a private profile that only you have. If I want to, and I have a healthcare profile, insurance profile, a travel profile with data and platforms I've connected to Yorba. And then if I want to sign in for XYZ healthcare platform, I can bring my own data with it, but nobody else has that, right? I don't have to go ask all these different data healthcare things. I have my own kind of agency over that data. And the fun thing with AI is that I could run my own local AI on that. So it doesn't train the LLMs. I bring what we call BYO AI, but you bring your own AI to it. That I think is like I really think that starts to get to like the concept of a light web, right? Because you're essentially collapsing all of these things, and like you're not asking permission to all these companies that are going to make it very hard for you to do what you want to do. You're asking permission of yourself between you and your like AI agent on the same data. It's very interesting.
Well, I think that gets back to your curious word obeying there. Okay, so I envisioned, and the way I wrote about it, I think it was like 2014, was that vendors would have to earn our trust.
Yep.
This is, in the light web, it's not us at the mercy of them. It's the other way around, is that vendors would have to earn our trust.
Yeah.
And that in this ecosystem, you know, we can kick people out instantly if they don't obey the social contract there.
Yep. And there's a lot of really great writings around that. And that's, I mentioned the book earlier, Clue Train Manifesto from Doc Searles, which is all about this concept of VRM, which stands for Vendor Relationship Manager, which is essentially you managing vendors, which Yorba is built on a lot of that type of thinking, right? It's like,
okay.
But the only way to do that is to start to manage yourself better, to be able to manage these different vendors. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about a little bit more as we move along here about this downstream effect of our past behaviors, because Liesl and you and I got into a funny conversation about that. That's what we've already kind of mixed around it there with our comments about our aspirational selves. But this downstream effect is what Yorba is really cleaning up for us, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, on the one side of the spectrum, there's every open door is like a data breach, essentially. Yorba does well with that kind of downstream effect of people that understand privacy risk. We do really well with data privacy and security people that understand that Yorba helps solve an interesting problem, because a lot of things that you hear online these days or people talk to you about is around like, oh, add this layer, add this security layer, get this virus anti-protection, which are all needed, but there are all more layers on top of stuff. And what Yorba is trying to say is that it's privacy by reduction, basically. It's like, or you just reduce the amount of doors that you have to watch, or how big the neighborhood is for the cop to patrol. And so privacy by reduction is kind of where you're looking at all these different past selves, you're closing all of these doors. If you've got 250 open doors and old logins and inactive subscriptions, those are all data trails about you, essentially. And why would you want 250 different like profiles out there around yourself, right? So we would say close them, and you'll feel lighter.
And you know, I do want to acknowledge that, you know, people or everyday people like me are not dumb or unwise when we subscribe to things. Like you had this great way of describing it, and we brushed over it earlier too, but I want you to describe it better because it helps me understand my fellow man better. But you have this great Death Star analogy that talks about how even companies with the very best intentions originally kind of get sucked into this weird world that we're stuck with right now. Talk to us a little bit about the Death Star analogy.
Yeah, I mean, the Death Star, right, is that for all the Star Wars fans, right, it's Jedi turned evil, right, essentially, right? So going from light to dark to stay in that kind of paradigm. But, you know, I think there's just a lot of things that get kind of sucked into the Death Star side of the internet, and eventually it's going to, you know, you have even Google saying like their original manifesto is don't be evil and stuff like that, and you'd have a lot of people these days that say that they have basically squashed innovation and acquired all these different companies over the last 10, 15 years, and they are a big part of the kind of data ecosystems that exist today, right? So there's a lot of good companies that start with pure intent, but, you know, the bigger you get, the more mouths you have to feed, you know, the more outside voices enter your company. it's just more variables, right, that start to turn things in different directions. And, I have past experience with that, like before starting RUCA, my design cooperative. Before that, a political tech startup called Advocate, and we were trying to do like civic engagement, data-driven democracy, and basically having like politicians and anyone that represents somebody have a better understanding of like the data underneath that represents it. Or that they should be representing, right? We could never find traction, right? We got a lot of like pats on the back, like, this is great that what you're doing. If you were a nonprofit, I would donate, which goes back to the PPC thing, like we crossed it over. But we're like, well, we're not a nonprofit. We raised capital. We raised like $750,000, and we were going to raise a lot more. But they wanted to turn our platform into an advocacy platform for brands because that's where the money was. So instead of like people being able to show how they wanted their representatives to represent them in democracy, right? They essentially, we had investment and interest to basically turn that same thing into, well, how could Pepsi then lobby, or I won't pick on just Pepsi, how could Pepsi or Coke or any of these kind of fast food type of things lobby the government to do the same thing, but not for the interest of all these people, but for the interest of this corporation that wants pizza to be categorized as a vegetable for American school systems, right? As an example.
Exactly, as an example.
As an example. And we didn't go that route, right? That would have been the easier route. A lot of times it's the easier route. That's kind of an ongoing theme that's kind of what has accrued and kind of like created this kind of the rot of the internet is a term that you'll hear people talk about online these days around like things are just like rot and they're rotting. It follows that whole enshittification, blogosphere, content producers. But it's just that everything doesn't have to be as good as it once needed to be, right? So, because there's less competition.
Right. Okay. So, and that brings us to like you giving us something we can start to do tomorrow differently.
Yeah.
Because, people, I hope as I mentioned, there's going to be an enormous article about this with even more essentials than Chris and I had time to talk about on the Goodness Exchange. So if you go to the Goodness Exchange, it's free to the world, a big global platform with thousands of articles about what's right with the world. And you go to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast there will be this interview and some shorts and some clips. And then there'll be a large written article too, where I'll put all the things that Chris wants us to connect to and that I've mentioned. And still yet, I want people to be able to come out of listening to this and know what to do next. Talk to us about some digital wellness habits that you see that are possible. We've got 4 or 5 of them that are written here. Tell us as many as you like.
Yeah, it's I think for digital wellness, like I just think that a lot of people create this kind of anxious world, this chaotic world around themselves, and there's just a lot of things that can make it a lot easier on themselves. So the concept of digital wellness, as we see it, is basically not quitting the internet, but just making more time for yourself to do what you want to do on the internet. So the easiest things to do is people usually start with their inbox. Go there, unsubscribe, honestly, from as many things as you possibly can. It would be my recommendation. Even some people get nervous. They're like, oh, well, I don't want to unsubscribe from my bank or things like that because I need those notifications. They'll find you. You're just unsubscribing from all the automated stuff. They will reach you if they want to reach you, but you're unsubscribing from all the lists that they have you on.
This is really an important detail.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure everyday people really have thought through is that there's this automated list that you get on that is just blanketing everyone, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And that is not the kind of stuff that you need to see in your inbox. Like, don't be afraid to unsubscribe to things. They will track you down if it's important.
Yeah. And I've had it happen before where you unsubscribe from type of stuff and, it's not even a big issue to them, right? Because they'll just know that you've unsubscribed from something, so you're not going to get something. So let's say your bank needs to reach you, you'll just get an email from your bank like a normal interaction.
It's just should be.
I think the easiest thing is to definitely unsubscribe from all the emails that you never open. I like to look at the open rate first, which Yorba shows you. unsubscribe from it. If you don't open it more than like 70% of the time, 80% of the time, unsubscribe. And then for the ones that, then I also look at frequency, right? For the ones that I think ask too much of my time, which for me is usually about over 5 emails a month. If you send more than 1 email a week, I'm usually not into it, unless it's something I really adore. And so I get rid of that. And then the second thing for like the digital wellness is all these accounts we keep talking about. And that's the hardest thing. And I think it's one of the things that Yorba does the best online is like looking back 20 years, seeing all these things that are potential accounts. Some of them might not be, but just starting to mark all of these things for deletion. And Yorba will follow up, make sure that they either are account, aren't account. If like it was a small company that you created a thing for and it got acquired by a larger company, make sure that your data didn't go into some other larger company through an acquisition 15 years ago, which happens all the time. But yeah, clean up all the things that you have accounts with online, because if you don't need it, if you haven't logged into it in like 10 years, you don't need it and you should delete it. And you can always sign back up. They make it easy. So.
Chris, yes, that's exactly right. Chris, is there some reason why this would happen? So about this time of year, I just go through and I find the unsubscribe button in every email that I can possibly do. And I'll get an email from the exact one I unsubscribed from 2 days later, as if I never did. Is there some bigger or broader thing that we should know about this unsubscribing?
Yeah. I mean, by law, they have to allow you to have an unsubscribe button. They can make that unsubscribe button not work, which we see.
Okay.
And that happens on Yorba sometimes where it's just like, it doesn't actually unsubscribe them from something, right? Or it unsubscribes them, like we talked about in the past, from the Tuesday bill and not the Friday email. So for you as a human, you're like, wait, I unsubscribed from this. Why am I getting this again? For them as a platform, they're like, well, no, you unsubscribed from one out of the 15 email lists that we put you on. So you're on multiple lists, not just one. So that's one of the ways that people do it for sure. And on Yorba, we also, because of that, we also have a way we work with, it's called Spam House, because we didn't want members on Yorba to have a dead end. So basically, if you try to unsubscribe and it like fails, because that can happen like 1 out of like maybe 20 times, you'll actually get it failing, which means it's not a real unsubscribe link. They have it in their email, but they don't actually want you to unsubscribe from it. You can report it to Spam House. Enough of those things get reported, and yeah, it's they get in a lot of trouble.
Okay, good. All right. So one last thing before we start to wrap up. When we look at our digital wellness in the world, and we, everyday people, don't know where to start, we are looking for trusted advisors. I have a whole public speaking talk that I do on something called the gratitude economy, which I think is rising. There's this whole economy of people and people like you who are providing services that we are just so grateful for. And in the gratitude economy, folks generally have something in their core that makes them provide that level of personal service and real connection. They're looking for connection. So tell me how you got here. Like, you have a very big, successful, giant firm, and you've had a long history in the digital world. How'd you get here, and why do you care so much about the rest of us?
Yeah, that's interesting. It is kind of a long path, right? So like I was a journalism major, right? So I started with journalism and all the media type of stuff. And then I worked in ad agencies and pharmaceutical and healthcare agencies and built CRM systems for, some of the large, like companies with 300,000 employees, some of the largest companies in the world. So I got to see all the data that was kind of flowing behind those, and have also, designed websites for some of the largest media brands online that have over 100 million unique visitors a month, right? So I worked in the different agency space and then created my own design cooperative, which also is like a self-organizing type of thing with over 100 people all over the world. Because I believe that like location doesn't matter. It's a borderless operation. We don't have borders, and we just basically figure out a way to do like process design to unleash all these time zones, which is actually really interesting. And through that, with my design firm, which is Ruka.co, where we've built brands and products and websites and all that, I would just like work with all these different companies, from startups to enterprises, in all sectors, healthcare, finance, all this type of stuff. But just seeing a little bit behind the scenes of like kind of all these different things that they have to help do all these different types of things, from like retain customers, convert customers, all the type of stuff. It's not bad. It's just there's just a ton of tools on the business side of it that keeps people in these loops, and they make it really hard. And because it's not necessarily it's a hard business to start on the consumer side of it, that's why we wanted to start Yorba. And so Yorba started as an idea inside of Ruka, our design firm. And the initial idea was we basically turned a lot of our designers and said, how would you fix the internet, right? Like, how would you apply human-centric design to the internet? And they all kind of came back with those different ideas and stuff around, email, all the notifications, turning off notifications, having my own private profile I can connect to things instead of like these social profiles that continue to track and stuff. So that's how we all kind of got here. And then I guess I've always kind of had like a public benefit type of bend to the companies I try to create, from like the civic engagement stuff, which makes it harder for sure. And when Advocate couldn't make it the traditional route, we started Ruka to essentially set up our own publishing platform for companies that we believed in, that we could give it the runway without needing outside investment to really try to like incubate it and prove it, and then amass essentially tons of really creative entrepreneurial people around it. So it's kind of our unfair advantage is that we're launching these companies, but we have like all this amazing design and creative and marketing and content talent that we can kind of pull into and out of without having to like hire all these full-time people for Yorba. Yorba is very like a small team of like full-time people. Yorba is maybe 15 people, maybe like 12, 15 people full-time. But then there's an ecosystem, a creative ecosystem that exists around Yorba that very much kind of keeps driving it, which is our design agency, Ruka.
You've actually been getting some amazing press lately, right? By the time this interview publishes, yeah. Tell me the kind of folks that are looking into Yorba.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the last 2-3 weeks, so about 2-3 weeks ago, people are really starting to understand or be more interested, I would say, in the consumer hive mind. And a lot of this kind of happens around the holiday season when like overabundance continues onward for a little while. And then all of a sudden it's New Year's, right? And then New Year's, people are like, okay, I got to reset, got to have resolutions, got to like have a new focus thing that I'm going to do for hopefully more than a month. So we had the Wall Street Journal reach out to us and use some of our data in a piece around basically subscription overload and basically how all these physical products need subscriptions. We also had the Financial Times reach out to us, and we were basically able to look at, it was about kind of the Netflix and HBO Max and kind of the subscription economy, and basically pull data that, they were interested in how many different types of labeled streaming platforms do people subscribe to from our Yorba member data. And in an anonymized way, we have all those kind of AI bots that we can run against this data that we're going to have on our platform next year for the whole community. But basically we're able to tell them that there's like 45 different things that are streaming services, but not one of those has been actually created in the last 5 years. So we are starting to see the collapsing on top of each other of all the streaming services. So that was a piece that just came out like right before Christmas in the Financial Times. We've been contacted by NBC News, and we've been contacted by 60 Minutes. But I'm not exactly sure where that's going to go. That's through a friend of ours who works at MIT in the digital economy space, and they contacted him directly. Yeah, who knows? But 60 Minutes, my parents will watch it.
Yes. Well, I gotta say, right here, I don't usually do the whole subscribe to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast and do this and do that. Yeah. Here's what you got to do for us. I almost never do that, but I am starting more often to hear back from young new startup founders that we've interviewed. And it does matter when you share things like this, because you never know who this interview whose ears it will land on. I have a nonprofit leader who had her whole project funded for a year, including a facility, because the podcast that I interviewed her in landed on the ears of just the right philanthropist in Philadelphia. Exactly. So
Yeah.
you just never know. Share this. We got to get Yorba opening up that internet 3.0
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the light web, and we can all be a part of a new future. So with that, and the reason why I brought up the fact that I suspect you're going to be enjoying more and more inquiries and interviews, if this interview had only been 2 or 3 minutes, what do you really wish people knew, Chris? Because I have my 2 or 3 minute spiel. If I had to boil
Yeah.
everything down that I've learned, I mean, what does it really come down to that your lived experience has taught you that might be helpful to others?
What I've noticed just basically over the last 20, 30 years of doing this is that the internet was not built for people. It's built for platforms. It's built for platforms to connect to platforms. There's a reason why B2B is an easier thing to do to B2C out there, and why most of the models on B2C don't make it so you pay for them. When we want to help facilitate better relationships in this new era, because I think that there's a chance to do it, because the kind of existential dread and overwhelming feeling is pervasive across everything. Like everyone we talk to, all these type of things, and these companies are grasping at straws, trying to find every different way to do that. And I do think that there's a better way where it's just, you don't have to guess, you don't have to track me, you don't have to buy all this data and like add it to my profile and stuff. Just be a better company and ask me. And if I want to be in that relationship, I'll probably even tell you more than you want to know, right? I'll give you more access to stuff so that you can customize things towards me. And that's where I think we will start to see the internet going, is less of these kind of like mega platforms and stuff, and more of these kind of interoperable kind of data portability is like a concept, and what people call online like self-sovereign identity. And that's something that we believe in intrinsically.
Is it possible that we can eventually get to a world like, I think that attention is the currency of the internet. It's how many people you can get to give you their attention. Is there a world where trust could be the currency of the internet?
Yeah, I 100% agree. When we started Yorba, we had kind of 3 ground truths, and that was, save people time, save people money, increase trust. Those were kind of the 3 things that we were like, this is what we want to build a platform to do. Right now, we are in the save people time, reduce all the emails, save people money, reduce all the subscriptions. Increase trust is the next phase of where Yorba will be going, and that's around kind of helping better facilitate this identity layer between you and the platforms that you actually want to be using.
I have to remind folks that this is we're talking to Chris pretty early in this adventure, and I joined for a year because I know that things are going to keep increasing over the next year in your capabilities and what you can do to help me clean the garage.
Yeah.
I mean, really clean it.
Yorba right now is, people see us as about cleanup, because that's what we are primarily focused on, because everybody needs to, essentially, you got to start somewhere. And the easiest place to start is just cleaning up all the past and the present type of stuff. But where Yorba really is going, it's about reclaiming this kind of internet that could have been, and also helping shape and build what it could be. Because the time is now with all this AI type of stuff, because the amount of clutter and crap and all this stuff is just compounding. And I think it's just, there's a way right now where like the search kingdoms are a little wobbly, the social kingdoms are a little wobbly, right? And then the AI one is just growing right now, but right now they don't have sign in with ChatGPT on things. They don't have deep profiles for you on ChatGPT, besides what you're obviously asking that. They have a lot of information about you, but there's a way to make that private and silo that off. And it's just an interesting time to be looking at like your digital life as a whole.
And to come full circle here, I have to share with people the precise reason I wanted to interview Chris is because I'm always talking about protecting and expanding our worldview. And this, in the first 2 minutes of my initial conversation with Chris, he talked about joy. He talked about how the internet should be a source of joy. And I totally agree when people my generation often talk to me about how frightening the future is with the internet and AI. I just don't see it like that. I see it as a world of possibility as long as we support folks with efforts like Chris is putting forward. If we if we come together about the kind of world we want in the future, the internet should be one of the greatest assets in human evolution. I don't know. I think it could allow us to be human 2.0 and get out of our lizard brain more often. Right now, it's keeping us there. But I can't thank you enough, Chris, for helping us understand that there is a future where the internet can bring us more joy. Do you have any more that you want to say on that?
No, I think that, like the internet does a lot of great things, right? From an educational standpoint, from like information at the touch of your fingertips. Imagine that all going away, right? Where you couldn't just be like, oh, well, let me just check on that. Oh, yeah, in 1972, this happened and this thing. That's amazing. And so the internet is amazing. And there's a lot of amazing things happening on the internet that bring people a lot of joy. It's just the algorithmic type of stuff around attention, back to like, that's what we sell on. You sell on eyeballs and attention on the current state of the internet. And the way that that currently works is changing right now with AI type of stuff, because the way that, basically all these like news sites and stuff, if it bleeds, it leads and all that type of stuff. But all the media companies out there are hurting because all that data, all those like big platforms and free content that they've created for the last 20 years is now all just in the answer machines. So nobody goes to the websites, which means they don't see the ads, right? Which means that they don't have revenue, which is a problem as a society for sure. But it's also, I think that might mean that new models will emerge. So
I'm absolutely
excited. I'm excited about
that's
that.
exactly. Yeah, if they can't just keep pulling the wool over our eyes over and over again anymore, maybe trust can rise up as the
I think trust will definitely rise up. And like using the platforms that bring you joy, I think and then that is like going back to the joy stuff. It's like, and one of the tips that you asked about earlier is like one of the things that I would say the most is just like turn off all the phone notifications. Like be intentional with what you want to let into your life and when, because the phone notifications are drowning.
Yes.
Like it's just going to continue. Turn those off and kill all the root sources of emails. And that will, right away, you will be like, oh, wow, this is great.
That's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. And we're going to end on that because that is great advice. And it really is getting to the root of the problem, which will make us all feel better. So thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, to our to the point that Chris made about his hope in the future, I heartily agree, and I hope that you see that every guest that we talk up to on the Goodness Exchange and this Conspiracy of Goodness podcast is like Chris. Chris, it's just wonderful to talk to someone who's in the digital world and still has hope and still can see that wonderful light that's, I always love to reward the folks who are carrying a lantern for possibility, and you're certainly that. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, I hope that we've filled you with possibility and that you know that there is a world ahead of us that could be so much better. Thank you, Chris. Have a great, great week, folks.